We're here inside of a church, if you didn't notice. Well, a church can be a sanctuary, but it can be creepy as well. So who of you guys already know about movies which are maybe scary, which are maybe horror movies, but it doesn't need to be horror, playing or involving a church? Oh yeah, a couple of hands I'm seeing right now. So I'm so happy to have you here, either if you like horror movies or if you're brave enough to join us despite the horror movie part in this talk, to venture into the sanctuary, feel safe, and build a survival guide, not quite to survive horror movies, but to survive web security issues together, which could be a horror situation in real life. And real life dangers are even more scary, I think, than the movies we may or may not enjoy. Before I start getting into horror movie analogies, I need to do a little disclaimer. The first one will be to use those analogies to explain security issues. I might need to touch on some plot points of horror movies. So yeah, there will be spoilers, minor ones, but you have been warned. And if you see that there's a movie you still want to see and you're not too much comfortable with seeing some plot points, cover your ears. It won't be for long, so no worries. And the second disclaimer, a slight content warning. Horror movies are not the most harmless, pinkest glitter stories. Sometimes they'll be a little scary, sometimes they might be explicit. I try to be as careful as possible and as cute as possible in my content, in my slides, in my speaking, but please bear with me if I cannot manage to stick to that all the time, because horror movies be horror movies, right? So a small content warning here. Well, I'll be right back. Who of you guys saw this message or this quote inside of any movie? And I see some hands, and maybe you felt the same way as I did, like every time people say that, they will not be back, right? It's always the same. It's a bad omen. Same with this one. Let's split it up because it's the best idea to split up and handle all challenges on our own. Fighting a killer alone. Well, who is a little annoyed if people do that in movies? Oh, it's so good to see many hands because I feel the same. I feel sometimes a little annoyed. This became a meme, right? For a reason. And we have so many examples when it comes to movie literature, like people doing careless or even stupid things in horror movies. Like watching a killer tape despite loads of warnings and red flags and leaving it open in the flats so the small son can watch it as well and be ready to die. Yay. Or an intruder breaking into a chat room which is meant to be private and then haunting the people inside of the chat room because people don't pay attention to shielding it. Well, we all felt annoyed by some weird stuff people are doing in horror movies, like Scream, Zombieland, all of those movies which try to shield us with like setting up some rules we'd always keep in mind. But I do wonder, would we follow those rules? Are we really that more clever, or that more sophisticated, or that more better at people in horror movies? I guess you already know that there's sometimes some titles you might stumble upon. Maybe Eternal Blue, Solar Vines, Heartbleed, Shell Shock. Those are scary headlines, right? And those are not movie headlines. These ones are headlines from news portals in the real world. So yes, those headlines are connected to the bigger security issues and incidents. That means even if we're doing our best, sticking to best practices, building secure application, if some tool we're using, even SSH could be one of those, all the things we are doing might not be enough if other people don't stick to guidelines, stick to survival guides for horror movies or security issues. I like to use them as allegories for one and another because there's a parallel in between web security and horror movies. And of course, it's not a complete same picture. We will not have an apocalypse. We will not have zombies haunting us or hunting us. But there's wonderful allegories in between. Like a teenager entering a dark basement is like a company ignoring security alerts. Friends splitting up in danger could be an organization fragmenting security measures. There's lots of allegories, and we'll cover my favorite ones in a bit. And we're not only covering those because, as I said, we are in a church. It's a sanctuary. All evil spirits will stay outside, right? Like in Silent Hill, maybe, in this case. If there's no attack in between, right? I cannot see one yet. But yeah, we're here in a safe space. We want to craft a survival playbook, like the people in Scream did with the horror movie Survival Rules, just for security. So we can feel ourselves a little more secure, we feel more confident in developing our applications, and we can be the friendly team, the friendly professor, giving advice to other people living through those horror movie situations of web security. So yes, the first point we might need to see on how to build a survival playbook for security issues is to see, okay, are there warnings? Are there red flags? In both cases, maybe security issues, us as a developer or in horror movies. Oftentimes, people ignore warnings, right? May it be the typical signage inside of a movie, like danger, keep out? Or is he VE, like a common vulnerability entry, best practices, changelog media, even updates? How often do we ignore dependable, right? So how often do we ignore warnings? Switch the light on, basically. And if we want to listen to warnings, there's a allegory to horror movies as well, because oftentimes, maybe in Sinister, almost in all kind of horror movies, there's one person or a team in the background helping us, giving us lore, giving us warnings, giving us input. May it be the friendly professor in Sinister, basically a wonderful advisor, or projects and best practices conferences. My favorite advisor for us in the real world is the OWASP project. OWASP is short for Open Worldwide Application Security Project, and it's basically a group of volunteers with the aim to raise security in web engineering. And they do it in a couple of ways. May it be training, may it be having a wonderful, sophisticated online shop made for us to break it, so we can see how an attacker would behave. But I guess the most common one, the most thing a real, like us people will know, is the rankings they do. I guess the normal one was the common one is from 2021. They're working on a new one. And there's an LLM one, which is released, I guess, in this year, but for the common ranking, they are still in data collection normalization. So we are using the figures of 2021 and the top 10. And I, as a front-end developer, picked the 3 or 4 important ones for me, which mirrors a little bit what OWASP thinks when it comes to priority as well. All right, let's start with the first one. This movie is called The Invisible Man, and I'm not sure if many people saw the original one, which is from 1933, I guess. Yes, but there was a remake in 2020, which is pretty decent for a remake, right? And as the name implies of this movie, it's about a man, basically, who comes out to be invisible. It's the typical scientist who did an experiment going wrong, and he finds himself to be invisible. First, he hides himself because this is not a condition which is totally normal and totally cool. If nobody can see you, that's pretty scary. But as invisibility tends to come with some advantages as well, this, I guess it was called Frank, or Griffin was his name. He tries out those perks of invisibility, which starts out doing pranks, but does some more crimes and bloody things later. So basically gets evil pretty quick. And I do think that an invisible man is a wonderful allegory on the first rank of the OWASP security ranking, which is broken access control. And as the name implies, is on access control. So users who cannot act outside of their intended permissions, which is the ideal case, right? They cannot do what they shouldn't do, they cannot access data or do certain operations which they don't have the permission to. And a broken access control is the opposite. So a user who could act outside their permissions, if they'd be invisible and impossible to be controlled, right? So broken access control can involve unauthorized information disclosure, modification of data, or destruction even. For example, course, theft, or token manipulation. So all the things a user could do without having the suitable permissions. And this is basically the most occurrences in the contributed dataset of OWASP. So it's valid that it's rank 1 and the most important risk. So why did I choose Invisible Man to explain it? So because of the invisibility, of course. It's a perfect metaphor of unauthorized access. Like the Invisible Man, an attacker who exploits broken access control operates unseen within your system and wreaks havoc without you noticing it, right? And I do think that's a pretty obvious abuse of power. Like Griffin, the scientist, invisibility represents a privilege escalation. Basically having powers without, outside of the control of the people granting those permissions. It leads us to a false sense of security, because if we cannot see the attacker, we think we're safe, right? So that's the reason why I was looking. Is there an invisible man here inside of the sanctuary? Hopefully not, because we wouldn't be able to sense him, right? If he is witty and not slams the door or something. So guards and dogs cannot stop what they can't see, and that's the same in security and access control as well. And last but not least, being invisible leads to having a traceless crime. So in security, a broken access control issue is oftentimes not able to be locked. So it takes some time for us to notice this, and then it's already too late. So, okay, that sounds pretty scary, but what are our survival rules? How can we have a playbook to survive broken access control? Yeah. Go by the principle of least privilege, deny everything by resource when it comes to all permissions you could come up with, no matter if it's just read operations or full CRUD or whatever. Only give the least amount of permissions possible, unless it's a public root. So if it is public, everyone can see it, then it's not that much important. But as soon as you restrict it, keep least privilege as default. A rate limiter is pretty handy when it comes to battling broken access control, because you minimize harm. They cannot just brute force their way in, right? Like using a hammer or some blunt thing to basically break through the door. No. If you're using tokens like JWT tokens, you should invalidate them on a pretty often rhythm, if I can say it like that. So keep them short-lived, refresh them as often as possible, and stick to the OAuth standard if you need a longer lifetimes. In this way, a broken access control has a smaller attack window, right? So if an attacker gets your token, they cannot use it for too long, which is pretty handy. And last but not least, think about access control mechanisms, so you don't need to build it all on your own. So in this way, you can minimize course resource sharing. And there are a couple of tools like OpenFGA, which is by the OpenCNCF Foundation, which is pretty cool. So maybe check it out. All right, the next one. I'm talking about Hellraiser. It's from 1987, as far as I know. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But I do think there's one part which is a wonderful allegory on the second rank in the OWASP ranking. It's the puzzle box lemon configuration. And this is the central piece of the movie, which revolves around people who are solving this puzzle, the lemon configuration. And if they solve it, it opens up a gateway to the hell-like realm of the Xenobite life forms. And those Xenobites are not the nicest neighbors, to say it like that, because they will hunt you for experiments. So maybe not the best idea to solve this puzzle box, right? And in the first movie, at least, a woman tries to resurrect her lover who solved the puzzle and became a victim in this process. And I do think it's a wonderful allegory on cryptographic failures, because Yeah, if you basically crack open this lemon configuration, you'll be basically hunted, right? So cryptographic failures are previously known as sensitive data exposure, but they changed the name because this data exposure is only a symptom of the problem. Because cryptographic failure needs basically shows into encryption or the lack thereof, so always encrypt your data. I went for the lemon configuration because it was basically the best allegory to go for, even though it's not completely right. But I think that the puzzle box, lemon configuration itself, is the encryption system, and the xenobytes are the consequences if it gets broken. And the different dimensions of the xenobytes, which basically being open, are the security contexts, which are being basically broken open. And the resurrection of the lover of the woman called Frank is the failed data recovery. So even if you see that there's a lack of encryption and you try to fix it, you never know how much data is already out there, and the consequences can be widespread. And you never know if the recovery will be successful or not, like the resurrection of Frank, which wasn't too successful, let's put it like that. So how can we avoid getting into cryptographic failures? Obviously, we should encrypt our sensitive data. And for being able to have the proper encryption in place, we need to classify. So we need to know what data is sensitive, what not. In my opinion, we should encrypt everything, but at least have some classification, especially if there's a leak somewhere that you can trace it back and you know that it's maybe just like isolated onto this kind of data. Don't store sensitive data unnecessarily. So everything you don't need, either don't load it from the get-go or discard it as fast as possible, because it opens up the attack window, right? So please get rid of it, or if you need it, use PCI DSS compliant tokenization or truncation so you don't open up or make it easier for the attacker. Don't cache sensitive responses, so they're not there for the attacker to be grabbed, basically. And try to stay up to date. And then maybe think about avoiding FTP or SMTP, because they can be grabbed often pretty fast. And let's quickly get to the next slide, because I was a little fussed. Right, that was a spoiler, but yes, I will talk about Alien, which was in the 70s, and one of my favorite horror movies because it has wonderful motives. But especially is this like the point where I was basically creating this tool, because I think it's a wonderful allegory on one ranking, which is especially important for front-end developers. Well, to get you all on the same level, Alien is basically a story about a spaceship crew who investigates a derelict spaceship because of an emergency signal. And it seems empty at first, but some people were a little too curious, took a look at certain life forms and eggs, and basically brought back a new guest. Let's put it like that. And yeah, basically this new guest led us to have the space crew hunted by a deadly extraterrestrial creature. So again, the plot is a little explicit. I do my best to keep it a little cute, but bear with me if I cannot do that, because this is one of the main characters. This is the guest. And it looks friendly, it just wants to hug people, but, well, I wouldn't prefer to be hugged by this creature, because if you want to get hugged, you might be up for a special souvenir, right? And this special souvenir brings us to the third rank, which is most important. But just to start, the facehugger is basically a small being which makes people hosts. So how can I put it the best way? Basically, it's an initial attack vector. In the movie, there's an injection taking place of an egg into a human. And this makes it a perfect, as I already spoiled, allegory on injection, because It's like an input validation bypass. An injection is basically that an attacker injects malicious code into your application, and it will be executed as if it was their own, like our own code. And this is exactly what happens in Alien as well. So yeah, initial system penetration by this little friend. It implements basically an egg which is attached to a human payload injection, like it's attached to our application, and basically a code injection, like an egg injection. And this egg will be born at some point, which is a problem for the human, right? Because the human will be hurt in the process. It's the chest burster, it's called like that. So it bursts out, it gets into the spaceship like an ejection, like malicious code being planted into your application and being executed, bursting out, right? So it's a wonderful allegory in code execution and system compromise. And then we got our full-blown alien, the xenomorph, hunting us, which is basically the complete system access the attacker can wreak havoc, such as the xenomorph does inside of the movie. And yes, the resource consumption of such an attack is the least of our problems in this regard. So yes, it's a wonderful example to explain injection, which is rank 3 in the overspranking, and most important for front-end developer, because this is the part where we are responsible and we need to take care of. Okay, so how can we avoid to end with a chest burster or an injection attack in our application? So, try to only use safe APIs, say of trusted sources, avoiding interpreters, or consider ORMs. This is pretty easy, but there's more you can do. Like having a fail-safe in mind, maybe server-side input validation. And if you go for SQL functions, features, there's an SQL injection where a query will be adjusted to get a data out and stuff like that. Try to use limit or other controls to keep the attack window small again. And the main part is using escape, or basically escape special characters using a specific syntax, or be careful generally when it comes to SQL structures. Basically all structure which are user-supplied. Try to escape all the things you don't want to be in, may it be a script, may it be a SQL query, may it be anything. And it's pretty easy to have it. This is a simplified example, and I'm just brushing through it because of the time frame we still have. Let's call it a quarantine system class to match the alien allegory. And it's basically a scanner to detect the chest burster inside of our input, right? And if it's detected, we can have an error being thrown and just stop the operation so it's not being executed. And if it gets through this quarantine system part, we could say we do sanitizing, which is basically the actual escaping, like decontamination, so to say, a process of cleaning. And you can use tools like DOM purifier, sanitize HTML, or even do it on your own if you want to, or rely on framework or browser language features. So there are lots of ways on how to approach sanitization or escaping. You just need to use them. If you want to go for regex, here are some examples I used before. You can make a small picture, but I will share my slides too, so don't worry if you cannot just snag the picture right now. But as I know, many people, including me, like to generate regex expression by ChatGPT, Copilot and stuff. Be careful. Be really careful when it comes to AI-generated suggestion, because it's my favorite example on how to get vulnerable AI-generated snippets into my code, because there's a regex denial of service attack, basically. So be aware of that and the things which are being suggested to you. But this is a whole story for a different talk. If you're interested in that, maybe I will do it next time. All right, last but not least, let's jump to one important point, which is the 6th ranking of the overspranking. It's basically The Blob. It's an interesting movie from 1958, where an alien crashes on Earth, and it grows and grows and grows by engulfing things and people. And the more bigger, the more redder it becomes, the more aggressive it is, and normal weapons are of no use. So a pretty scary alien, right? And I do think it's a wonderful allegory on technical debt, and especially on vulnerable and outdated dependencies. So yeah, this one is difficult to test, as said. But if you don't fight your outdated dependencies, they will grow even worse and worse and worse. And this is basically the parallel to the movie. And yeah, it's a wonderful allegory on dependency sprawl. The consumption of victims is the vulnerability speed, and as it's unstoppable, it's the unmanaged dependencies. And I'll be pretty quick. How to get out of this situation, remove all unnecessary features, unused dependency, everything you need to maintain and don't need anymore. You could have an inventory of all of your version numbers so you know when to update. Only use like trusted sources, prefer signed packages so you know what you get into your project. And monitor if a library is not maintained anymore, because if it's not maintained, nobody will fix the security issues anymore. And last but not least, listen to Dependabot. We all ignore it sometimes, but it's really important that it got its point, like always listen to the warnings. So there are some commands I used as an example, but let's take a look at them in the slides or the small pictures. And yeah, the new OWASP ranking will be there in 2025. And there's one ranking for LLM specifically being aired this year, so you should take a look at that. Okay, let me ask general rules. Don't feel alone, tackle issue with community, and contribute. Never split up, either in a horror movie or here. And I see so many people here in the sanctuary learning and talking about security. So I'm pretty positive that we will work on security and raising security as a team. Take care of your tools. Take care of your batteries. Don't be the one without any energy on your phone or in your torch. So the same amount of effort should be put inside of your tools you use when it comes to developing. Double check if the killer was defeated. How often is a killer standing up again because people don't double check? So always do testing. Security testing is a thing. Always do login. And please don't ignore the warnings. Don't be the person who knows, I know better. If people say injection is a thing in front end, they might have a point, especially if it's a bigger group. All right. My name is Ramona Schwering. I'm a developer advocate at Auth0 and a GDE in web technologies. I'll be somewhere around here, so in case of questions, let me know, and you can find me on all given platforms. Thank you so much for being my comrades.